exploring the perspective of lived experiences. I am Holly Rees-Barkell, and I'm your chair for the next hour or so. In terms of a little bit about me, I'm a chartered engineer and fellow of the IMechE. I work for Fraser Nash as their strategy and growth director, and I've recently been appointed as the chair of the DNI committee for the. I wanted to support this webinar because having conversations about diversity and inclusion and taking positive action really matters. At the IMechE, we want to ensure that both members and our employees feel that they belong, but also we want to have a positive impact on the wider engineering profession and to ensure that we're welcoming for all, regardless of their background. And that's why diversity and inclusion is embedded into the IMechE values and also into the IMechE strategy. In terms of the webinar today, I'm joined by a fantastic panel, and in my short time with them, I've already got some of my own ideas about how I can personally be more inclusive, also help me to learn how I could be more creative of an inclusive culture. So I hope by the end of this webinar, you feel the same and that you're able to take away some real practical examples, and you can use these in your workplace and in the other communities that you interact with. So in terms of the format for the next hour or so, in a second, I'm going to ask each of the panel members to introduce themselves, and we're going to have a bit of a discussion around some pre-prepared questions where we hopefully can bring out those practical examples for you. There will also be a chance for the audience to ask any questions you may have, and I have Donovan helping me in the background and behind the scenes with those questions. So please do feel free to start submitting those questions using the chat function, and we can get to those questions in the latter part of the session. So today I'm joined by Roy, Heather and Anne. Over to each of the panel members to do a short introduction about themselves. And Roy, if you wouldn't mind keeping us off, please. Looks like for a second we've lost Roy. Oh. Anna, if we could come to you first for an introduction, please.
No problem, I'll step in. My name's Anna Preston. I'm a chartered civil engineer, so it's already a bit of inclusivity here and being included in the IMechE, so I quite like that. Worked in the construction industry now for over 25 years, so I've seen a lot of changes and things happening during that time. Currently work doing product development, developing new products for the temporary works industry, which is a full-time job. And I'm also passionate about STEM outreach for schools. I'm involved with STEMazing, and I'm also developing a sort of offspring group where we're looking at how we can make the STEM activities that we already offer more inclusive for other groups of pupils and children. My interest in diversity and inclusion started about 6 years ago when I got an autism diagnosis, and it sort of helped me make sense of why I'd never fitted in anywhere and why I was always struggling with everything. And since then I've been pursuing that strongly and sort of fighting for my rights as an individual and trying to make people more aware of the needs of autistic people and people, neurodiverse people in general. That's my introduction.
Thank you, Anna, and thank you about being so open about your experiences so far. Heather, if I could.
Yes, of course. So I'm Heather Timms, and I work as an advisor in an engineering consultancy called GHD, and I work in the advisory area. I'm relatively new to my career. I completed my bachelor's about 2 years ago, but I am also extremely passionate about diversity and inclusion as well. I became visually impaired about 8 years ago, and that started my journey within STEM as well, because within that year I went and did a bachelor's in a STEM subject in mathematics, and I have definitely felt excluded in some areas, and I'm extremely passionate that I don't want anyone else to feel like excluded. So I'm very passionate about all making everything that we can as inclusive as possible. So I work in the engineering consultancy, but I'm also a part of their accessibility working group, which is a worldwide initiative within the business about helping accessibility issues. And like their mantra is like accessibility is for everyone. So if you improve accessibility, it won't just help the people that need require that extra support. It also helps everyone, which is really useful. But also I volunteer as well in STEMazing, a non-profit organisation that is within outreach and inspires the next generation of STEM careers. I think that's me. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Heather. And I found your career journey so far inspirational. So hopefully we can bring out some of those points in the questions when we get to them.
Thank you.
And Roy, last but not least, could you do an introduction, please?
Apologies, I seem to have dipped out earlier. Am I back? Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Very good. Yeah, sorry, I'm a chartered engineer with the IMechE, currently based in London, and I now work in the insurance sector as an energy loss adjuster. But prior to that, I graduated in Aberdeen 20 years ago and joined the energy sector, and that's where I started getting involved with the Young Members Panel up in Aberdeen. And that progressed over time to me getting involved in mentorship with chartership candidates, and also then I was presented with a chance to move to London, and once I moved to London I got a bit more involved with headquarters and started doing professional review interviews, and over some time I got to know the organisation a bit better, and had the opportunity to help the trustee board as an observer with the change in culture and values and behaviours that we were launching a few years ago. So I really enjoyed that period. And alongside that, I was able to get involved with our diversity and inclusion committee. Obviously to me, it was tied in quite closely with our values and behaviours. And I've continued supporting that committee over the last few years.
Great, thank you, Roy. And some great examples there of how members can get involved with the institution as well. So thank you. Right, so let's move on to our first question. So the first question for the panel is, what does an inclusive culture look like? And Anna, if I could come to you first, please.
Oh, right. Well, to me, just in my experience, it's an environment where individuals and groups in societies, personal and professional, can be sort of like taken into consideration. People can consider differences and needs, and then it gives the individuals a sense of belonging, a feeling of belonging, and sort of also a sense of capability. Because that, in my experience, I've found that sometimes I felt like a bit on the outside and somehow a bit disadvantaged in a way. So to me, an inclusive culture is that where everyone can be feeling a sense of belonging, and also it needs to be a culture where people are prepared to listen and understand and accommodate the differences of the people within that culture. I think that's sort of my brief answer to it.
A great start for us, Anna. Thank you. Heather, I'm going to come to you next. Is there anything you would like to add to Anna's summary?
I completely agree with Anna, what she said. That feeling of belonging and feeling of like I'm being heard is extremely beneficial in an inclusive culture. I feel that like an inclusive culture, it's everyone should have like a voice at the table, because the more diverse voices you can hear, the more like the better everyone can understand each other and feel safe for coming forward and talking and just belonging.
Great, thank you, Heather. And Roy, what do you think?
I think for an inclusive culture, I I try to take the temperature, if that's one way of looking at it, of any organization or team or group that I move into. And I think what I'm looking for is really to get a handle on the opportunity people have to learn in that culture. Can people ask questions? Is there an element of safety there that you feel like you can ask any question you'd like to ask? And then moving on from that, there's a bit about contribution. You know, is everyone allowed to contribute, and how are we helping people get involved? And is it meaningful as well? It's not just token gesture. So these are quite high level concepts, but these are the things that often show us that there's an element of inclusion that's being thought about, whether it's naturally happening or whether it's forced to some degree. But once you've got those things in place, you can start to, you know, maybe challenge things a bit more. Once you've got that those building blocks of being able to learn and contribute, then maybe you can start to challenge how things are being done. So for me, that's maybe a simplified high-level view of what an inclusive culture might involve.
That's great. I like the concept of those building blocks as well. So starting from a position where it's a safe space, people can share their views and opinions and feel that they belong. And then moving into that more questioning space where we start to get that innovation as well, because we know that it's the innovation within an organisation. Moving on to our next question. So the next question is, what are your positive experiences of inclusion, and how do you think that we can replicate these more widely? And Roy, if I could start with you this time, please.
Well, I've got a first-hand example of a positive experience, and that was being part of the IMechE and actually having access to a large volume of learning online now. Certainly, we've been through some internal training that was done with the trustee board and the senior leadership, and then it was rolled out to the broader membership and also the other staff members. So having access to that has been a really good experience, because you might not have access to that kind of learning material through your day-to-day work or through other sources. So I encourage people to look into that through the IMechE and what's available online. But in terms of a good experience, I recently joined insurance. I was consulting, and prior to that in the energy industry, but I've now moved across to a new sector, and I've found that there is a pool for knowledge, and there are a lot of similarities between engineering and insurance, actually, and probably in many other sectors as well, but the challenges have all been very similar. And what was a good experience is that we were able to launch diversity and inclusion moments here within this company that I've joined. And I took that from the IMechE, where we've been running these DNI moments at the start of meetings, very much like a safety moment you might have in engineering. We started applying culture moments and talking about very specific topics that people maybe haven't learned about before, just for a few minutes at the start of a meeting. Or maybe it might have been something a bit more broad, such as conceptual, and talking about that at the start, but always linked back to culture, values, behaviours, diversity and inclusion. So it really was an opportunity to learn something. And what I found in this organisation is that there was an appetite for it, and they've actually picked up the DNI moment concept, and this organisation is running with it. So I'm really pleased that the IMechE was able to help another sector and to help other people to learn.
Some fantastic practical examples there. Thank you, Roy. So I'm going to come to you next, please.
Sorry, was that me?
Yes, please, Heather.
So I've had quite a lot of positive experiences with inclusion around the different areas where I've been working. Some of them, like the team that I'm working in at the moment, in the insights and analytics team, they sorry, 1 minute. I am able to, I'm unable to see presentations when I'm in meetings and things, especially in big rooms because due to my visual impairment. So we have quite an inclusive culture. So they have like made sure that I'm able to bring in like assistive technology if I need to. So I can bring my laptop or another piece of technology so that I can actually read the screen in front of me instead of it being far away. Also, there's quite a lot of talk about socials, like being outside of the office environment is sometimes very difficult going into new environments, and it's really lovely that the people have considered. They've been asking me like if I what are the questions that I ask to venues and things like that, so I can be a part of their social gatherings. And team building exercises and team building events, which is really great. I really enjoy that I can still be a part of those events, and they can do it as they can do it inclusively. So that's very, very positive. And so I feel that can be like extended more widely. I've heard quite a lot of like office like teams sometimes just do socials at pubs and things, and that's not usually always very inclusive. Even for people with like caring responsibilities at home, they can't do evenings and things like that. Some people just don't like drinking, so having like that inclusive thought process, you can tailor the socials to it being like a catch up over lunch or something like that. So it makes that everyone can get involved, which is really very good.
Thank you, Heather. And you had a great tip for me in the preparations for this, in terms of a very simple thing, but actually saying your name before I begin to ask for your opinion, which makes a lot of sense. A very simple thing, but actually makes a lot of difference. So I think you've brought some nice little tips like that as well to the fore. So thank you.
Thank you.
And Anna, what are your positive experiences of inclusion?
Got a few, but I'm not going on to all of them. I'm just going to talk about one. It sounds quite small, but it stands out massively in my mind. This it wasn't a work-related experience. I was going to an exhibition outside of work, and I was told it would be very busy and the queues could be 1 to 2 hours. And in the instructions, it said if you've got hidden disabilities, you can come to the front of the queue. And just that to me was like, wow, that is so amazing. I know I can't stand in a queue. I can't deal with being close to people. It gets me wound up, and something inside happens where I can go into meltdown. And if it's really, really noisy as well, I get wound up and I'll get in the queue and I'll stay in it for about 10 minutes and then I'll end up not going to the exhibition. So the fact that they said as soon as you arrive, just come to the front of the queue and you can go straight in. And I didn't have to go into meltdown, get stressed out, or walk away from it all. And because they'd given me that instruction, said you can come to the front of the queue, I felt quite relaxed about going to the front of the queue, and it wasn't going to be misconstrued that I was having some sort of secret benefits or something, that it was something unfair that you go to the front of the queue and everyone's no, it's not right that person's just walked to the front of the queue. So it was absolutely an awesome experience for me, and I could go and enjoy the exhibition in a normal way like anyone else could enjoy it, and it wasn't seen as something unfair. I think it's quite hard with hidden disabilities. Like say a wheelchair user, I'm sure they'd love to run up the stairs into an exhibition, but they get provided with ramps. But for me, with a hidden disability, it's quite often overlooked, and it just seems like I'm getting unfair treatment sometimes because I'm jumping to the front of the queue. But that was a very positive thing that they said, like, you can come straight to the front of the queue and you don't need to stand in it and get wound up. And it was just the great feeling that they understood the needs of neurodivergent people. It's just an awesome thing to me. I just wish more people could understand that. So yeah, that's my quick example.
Thank you for being so open with your experiences, Anna. So I'm going to move on to the next question. It's a bit of a long one. So do you think that organisations take DNI seriously enough? And should DNI, or diversity and inclusion practices, be embedded in our business practices alongside health and safety and quality, for example? And if so, how do you think we could achieve this? And Heather, would you mind if I come to you first for this one, please?
Yes, of course. I think that like DNI is being taken more and more seriously as time goes on. We've had a lot of change in the past few years. Some have been really positive, and I think that like society is changing from a reactive DNI thing, so it's only going to get considered if people need it to more of a proactive approach, which is really good. So I feel like society is seeing DNI a little differently, going, we need to make this as inclusive as possible, to as many people as possible, more of a proactive approach, which I'm really excited to see. I think that's what notes. I think that's everything. My apologies.
Great, thank you, Heather. I can come to you next, please.
Sorry, is that me or Roy?
It was Roy, if you don't mind.
Okay, yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, I think I have seen a shift over the last few years to more focus on diversity and inclusion, and actually seeing some good role modeling from leadership and taking an active interest in these areas. And I think another telling part that people can look for is how much time is afforded to your team or to your management to think about these areas. Has there been time set aside for additional committees to look into some of these areas, for example? Is it encouraged? I mean, it makes it sound really formal when we say, well, we must set up a committee for this or for that. But actually, if you want to get people together and recognize it, maybe that's what could be done. But I think what we have to do is, this is my view, not necessarily the answer, but is to meet people where they are. Now, when I say people, I mean what stage is your organization at? You know, if you go from absolutely nothing to suddenly rolling out lots of new paperwork, for example, you might find that there's going to be some pushback and lack of understanding. So it's really a case of, I think, starting where your organization is at. So start to create awareness, start to create some kind of desire for change somehow. Once you've got some of that understanding and knowledge, then you can start to bring in some more of the business practices, or embed some changes. But the key thing as well to remember about this, and it's easy to get lost in it, is that the answer might not just lie in paperwork. It might actually be more related to the emotional culture of the organization. So by emotional culture, I'm thinking of how do people want to feel at work? I think we've mentioned already that belonging. You want to feel like you belong in many cases, and you want to feel like people are listening. So I think if we're starting to address those parts, then the paperwork can actually follow up after. And by paperwork, I mean the business practices or processes that might be in place.
So thinking of inclusion almost like a change program, perhaps.
That's it, actually. That's the format of it, and remembering it's a people piece. It's not just about getting the right boxes ticked. You've actually got to bring the people along, or in fact, the people have to drive it. I think that's one of the key things.
Yeah, and I think having the to contribute to those strategies as well, and also to have senior leadership support. So then you're forming a strategy from the bottom up, but also from the top down.
Yeah, that's right.
Anna, what are your thoughts?
Really like what Roy and Heather have said so far. I agree with all of that. It's really interesting. But in my experience, this is only my experience, I think things are improving with taking DNI more seriously, but I still don't feel that organisations are fully there. They don't fully take it seriously enough. I've come to that conclusion because I still feel that my own differences can cause difficulties for individuals and organisations. And I think if they were taking it seriously, I would like to feel that I wouldn't feel that way about my differences. Still feel at times I have to fight for the things I need and for things to be made more accessible for me. It has changed quite a lot, but there is still some of that there. I do think it's an increase in disabilities and neurodivergencies, and they're all like seem to be an increasing part of society. If organisations don't take it more seriously, we could end up discriminating against a large part of the population, maybe, by excluding individuals who've got high potential to offer. Again, I think the only way we can change this is just by raising awareness within organisations, by holding events like this, and like myself and Heather talking to pupils in schools about things like our own experiences, and just again embracing the culture of inclusion. I think that's really what's needed. And in terms of practicalities, just trying to create that level playing field so everybody can be at the same level on it. It's like what Roy said about meeting people at where they're at and working with that. So that's just my personal thoughts.
And your experiences working with schools, Anna, would you be able to say perhaps a little bit more about those in terms of how you got involved and the types of activities that you've been involved in and the type of impact you think that you've had?
Yeah, originally I just started working with schools, basically more or less. I did it through my workplace, and then I started during lockdown going remote and doing it online with schools, and I advertised that I was autistic, and then I got sort of bombarded by schools with special education need pupils, which was great, but I wasn't fully able to deal with all the requirements. So I joined Amazing, got a few top tips, and we've set up a sort of specialist group, as we call ourselves, which includes Heather and a couple of other people. And we started looking at the activities that we can offer and adapting them to make them suitable for as many people as possible, really. So we've just delivered a session to a school where the pupils had special education needs, and some of them had learning difficulties, some of them are non-verbal, some of them were in wheelchairs. So for an example in that, we were demonstrating forces, which involved blowing into a straw and launching a rocket. And some of the pupils couldn't blow, so we adapted a balloon pump to attach to the straw to enable them to press the balloon pump to launch the rocket. So it enabled them all to get involved with the activity, and nobody was excluded from it. And if they didn't want to do parts, they didn't have to do it. We just let them do what they wanted, and everybody got something out of it. And they learnt about push and pull as a life skill, which I think is really, really important. Even if they may not be going into that job in 20 years' time, I don't think they should be excluded from learning about STEM and life skills at this stage of their lives. So that's a little bit about what we're doing.
Thank you. And Heather, Anna said that you've been involved in some similar activities. Would you be happy to share some similar experience to Anna, for example?
Yes, of course. I started to become a part of Amazing again through work, and I was able to provide 6 sessions of STEM activities to a school up in somewhere in the UK via virtual. And Amazing were able to help tailor the activities, sorry, that's the word, the STEM activities, so that I can, some of them I wasn't even able to do myself, let alone teach other people how to do it, teach children how to do it. So I had a bit of like confidence issues there, but also like I did it more Blue Peter style because I can't do cutting under time frames and things like that. So we were able to tailor how I like presented in a way that the children were very like interactive and happy, and really enjoyed the sessions. Some of the activities did involve water, and again, that wouldn't work very well with the visual impairment and like the technology with water. So someone else, another just amazing volunteer, came and helped run these sessions. So someone else did the like pouring and whatnot. They did the thing, and then I was able to describe what was happening. So that was really great, and it showed that quite a lot of the activities can get like tailored and to be more inclusive from like the audience point of view. So that was really very good. And yeah, I'm a part of Stamazing Spark, I think it's called now. So with the special educational needs, so I can bring my experiences to them, and they so we can help tailor it for other audiences too.
That's great. Thank you for sharing, Heather.
That's okay.
So I have one more question for the panel, and then we can come to some audience questions. So just a prompt, if you do have any questions, please start popping those into the chat function for us. So the last question is, can DNI practices go too far? And Roy, if I could come to you, please.
But I think I'd have to think a bit more about what too far means. But I think if I interpret it, that might be that maybe the administration goes to a point where you actually start curtailing things happening. By that, I just mean, you know, physically having to review a number of issues before you do something. But I'm not too sure how to interpret it. The way to manage it is, in my mind, is always to go back to the cultural element. What kind of atmosphere do you have in the organization that you're working in? If it's not ready for engaging on certain issues, then you have to work on that piece first to then be able to bring in perhaps the new practices. So create that awareness and that learning opportunity, and then you can start to change the way that things are done. So I think it's a question again of going back to where you are. What stage are you at? It could be too far for where you're currently at. And an example I can give is the IMechE itself. When we were considering the new values and behaviours, when you have an organisation or a group of people that represent 3-4 different generations in one room, you're going to have different starting points, or at least people talking different languages. And by language, I guess that's more of an understanding of new concepts, terms that are maybe only just arising. You know, who's had a chance to learn about these things? So I think there's an education piece, or starting to change the language that we use, that could help to manage the growth of new inclusive practices. So getting back to open conversations and helping each other to learn about new things that just haven't been part of the workplace's language for the last, you know, number of years or decades. So it's about helping each other and having that self-awareness to know what you understand and what you need to learn about. That can help bridge some of these challenges that we might have with new practices coming into play.
Right. And I think sometimes you can be afraid of saying something incorrectly or using the wrong terminology, or perhaps saying something wrong. But in my experience, I've found that if I give it a go and say, this is kind of what I'm trying to express, and perhaps I haven't used the right terminology, but perhaps you could help me to understand how I could express it better. And going in with that attitude has been really kind of positively received. A way to create allyship in the community as well. So, Anna, if I could come to you, what are your thoughts?
Just like adding on to what you said, I totally agree. There is so much fear about using the wrong terminology and wrong words, and I'm sort of particularly prone to doing that. So it's like, it is worrying, but it shouldn't stop us having those open conversations. So it is received well if someone refers to me being someone with autism. I'm not too keen on it, but I'd just correct them and say I'd rather be called someone who is autistic. But I know that's going a bit off point, so I'll go back to the question.
That's okay.
It's a hard question to answer, I think, this one. Can inclusive practices go too far? At first I was thinking, no, they can't. We need to include everybody, like the pupils in the school. Like I was saying, like they got so much out of it, and at the end of it, they could point. The non-verbal ones pointed to faces, and one of them pointed to the smiley face, and they were doing it so hard, they nearly put the finger through the screen that they were pointing to it. And I thought they've really got that inclusion and that feel of belonging, even though they're never probably going to work in engineering or STEM or anything. They've still got that feeling of inclusion. But at the same time, I've been thinking about it today a bit more. And in my experience, I realised that I have to accept my own limitations. It's not all about inclusive practices. I do have limitations as well. There are things that I can't do, and it does disappoint me and frustrate me and leave me feeling excluded. But I realised from thinking about that inclusivity and inclusive practices cannot be infinite. Once all avenues have been explored, it can't go any further sometimes. But I don't think that should sort of detriment the future. It's sort of a sort of difficult balance. I think it's very difficult to balance trying to go too far, but with the individuals have limitations, but at the same time not like, in my experience, I've been like excluded from things at work because I've been unable to stay overnight, and I feel things like that's not an inclusive practice. But at the same time, maybe I can't progress my career because of that. It's because I've got my own limitations. I'm not really sure how to answer that question. It's a bit difficult for me. I think it depends on the individual and the limitations, basically.
Yeah, thank you, Anne. Thank you for sharing your experiences. And Heather, is there anything you would like to add?
Yes, so like inclusive practices, like going too far, like anything really can go too far. And as long as you have the right people that like are like like modeling the inclusive practices, that would be like the main thing, because like some inclusive practices are difficult and it needs to be tailored to certain individual like a minute. Every disability is very different, and like especially within the visual impairment, like and blindness, everyone sees very differently. So some things that works really well and helps and supports someone who has one form of visual impairment may hinder another person with a different visual impairment. And so those practices can't be like the same. It needs to be very individualized. And as long as the right people are like there to be able to like formalize those practices, but like consider everything. And quite a lot of people, it would be good for people to learn more about it. So there's quite a lot of resources on the internet. Like Roy said previously, the IMechE has some very good resources, and so do other institutes like the Royal National Institute of the Blind and things like that, specifically for certain disabilities. So it's very useful to get information from there, so that people can understand like a variety, because it would have to be like tailored to specific individuals if we're talking about like how to interact with certain people and make it inclusive for people. Yeah.
I think you raise a great point there, Heather, in terms of the importance of individuality, and perhaps also then that goes into a discussion around the difference between equality and equity. And actually, we need to encompass equity to encompass individuality of people.
Absolutely, I agree with that.
Thank you. So we have a few great questions coming in. So I'm now going to move on to those. Roy, I will probably come to you first. So just letting you know, so you've all got a bit of thinking time. So the first question comes in from Murray Merchant. Murray, thank you for your question. So the question is, can the panel give any advice as to how an organisation can assess how successful or not their DNI initiatives and their policies are? So I'll just read that out again for you. So can the panel give any advice as to how organisations can assess how successful or not their DNI initiatives and policies are? What do you think, Roy?
Well, my first thought goes to the experience we had with the IMechE. Now, I didn't run any of these frameworks or participate in them, and this is specific to professional engineering institutions, but the Royal Academy of Engineering do have a DNI progression framework with which they look at the professional engineering institutions and help them to benchmark where they sit across a number of areas of the organization, and that's, you know, reviewed every so many years to help the PEIs, the professional engineering institutions, to progress and to improve. Now, that's very specific, but I do believe there is support out there in the broader market to help you look at this. And I can't give you any specifics on that because I'm not familiar with the organizations that might be doing that. But I am quite sure that that is something that does exist out there. And I don't just want to throw this to my colleagues on the panel, but they may actually have some experience in this that I'm not aware of. But I think there are certainly consultancies that can help come in and help you on specific points, perhaps. But there may well be others that are very well geared up to look at your organization across all facets that exist for you. So hopefully that gives some indication that I think there is something out there that could be tailored to your type of organization.
Thank you, Roy. And I think you make a great point there about having data and being able to benchmark progress against that data. I think that's a whole discussion in itself in terms of the best ways to collect and store and utilize that data, and how we enable people to feel trusted with that that data once we've collected it. But that could be a whole in itself, I think. So yeah, from my perspective, there's a couple of ways to tackle it. And one of those is those quantitative measures, comparing progress against the data. But I also think there's a real element there about how people feel, which is the bit that's more difficult to measure. But for me, it's important to ensure that any strategies that are in place encompass both of those elements in them. At Fraser-Nash, we have a DNI strategy and a roadmap. So having those outlined activities, saying what is it we are looking to achieve, what activities are we going to undertake, and doing progress against those is also a helpful way to be able to look at how far we've come. And I think that's an important element too. I think we should take the time to stop and assess how far we've come and the progress that we've made, as well as looking forward to see what more we can do too. So I'm going to come to Anna next. Do you have any?
I'd say it's not my area of expertise, but in my experience of working, the company I work in at the moment, we do have employee satisfaction surveys, and they do talk about how people within the organisation feel, and you do get feedback about how things were compared this time last year, and it compares it on an annual basis, and you do get a feel of whether people are happy and content in the job. But that itself does have some limitations. I don't think there's so much about diversity and inclusion in the satisfaction survey. It's more about the general overall feeling and your relationship with your manager and relationship with your colleagues. And I think that there could be more done to add diversity and inclusion into employee satisfaction surveys. That'd just be my thoughts on it. Yeah.
Thank you, Anna. And Heather, what do you think about measuring DNI success?
So I was going to do the surveys, say about the surveys as well. Within the company I work for at the moment, we do like monthly or every 2 months surveys, and like most of the questions are the same, but there's some later questions that like change every time, and like having like 6 months, like every 6 months having that type of like survey would be very useful to know like how far you've come in the past 6 months, like improving that data. Data in the DNI area is very hard to come by, and it's very, very useful to have a look for, like to look into it. And there was another point, but I have forgotten it. So I am okay. That I will finish there.
That's great. If you remember it, then just give me a shout and we can come back to it.
Thank you.
So we have another question come in, and we've probably got time for another question after this. So if any of you have any burning questions, then please do submit them into the chat now. So we have a question from Thea O'Brien. Thank you, Thea. So the question, great question. So do you have any advice for getting wider DNI backing across the company? So I'll just read that one out again. So do you have any advice for getting wider DNI backing across the company as a junior employee? Heather, maybe I could come to you first for your thoughts on this one.
So I was very vocal about my passions for DNI, and the company that I work for at the moment is like very passionate about it as well. So there was already like DNI champions within the team that I work in, and so I started helping out on there. But like if you talk to your line manager, and you might be able to like start slowly, when Roy was saying about DNI moments and well-being moments in Teams meetings, that's what we do as well, which is really exciting. So I when I first started, within a few months, I opted to do a slide every 2 months or something like that, to give some information about different DNI topics to the team, and that was really good. So I think if there's no formal way or informal way yet, you can be the trailblazer, and if you want to talk to your line manager, I think that's the best advice I could give.
I love the thinking of being a trailblazer. It's a great one, Heather. Anna, would you like to add anything?
I think what Heather said perfectly right. I've had to be quite vocal in my company, but in my instance, my line manager at the time, which was a while ago, was blocking progress to some extent. So it was, in my instance, finding the right person within the organisation to listen to me. So it was actually someone in the HR department. So I think it's important, like Heather said, you just keep being vocal about it and find the right person to listen to you. And again, I like the idea of being a trailblazer too. So just keep going for it, is what I'd say, and try and do a bit of research around it and find out. I found some external organisations that were prepared to come into work as well and talk to my colleagues and my employer about specific DNI needs and requirements. So maybe you could have a look at that. There are quite a few charities out there what will come in for very little money, if your employer's not prepared to spend much on it. Or again, you can do your own sort of presentation to the company if you feel confident enough.
Yeah, I think there's some great tips there, Anna, and also perhaps it's better to have some momentum rather than perfection. So if you have an idea and it's be perfect and gold plated, then that can often hinder progress as well. And Roy, any thoughts from you?
Yeah, I think looking at the question as it's written, one of the things that jumps out is the word junior, and it just draws attention to the fact that particularly in engineering, there's a hierarchy and we work in a structure. So we're often boxed in and perhaps don't have a chance to drive something or take responsibility for something. But I think the very fact that this question's been asked shows that Theo, you're looking at this and actually trying to take responsibility for it and saying, well, how can I do this? So I think that's really important, that it is the responsibility of everyone. So anyone can have a go at trying to advance these concepts and understanding. And I think what's already been said is extremely relevant. And I think it's about getting out there and talking to the different generations and understanding different perspectives, but also trying to communicate the point, or maybe asking this question, if we're not driving diversity and inclusion, then who should be? And that's something that came up within the IMechE and the strategy itself. It's, people might think, well, this is our place of work. Why would we spend time thinking about these things? We're here to work. But the reality is there's an expectation from employees that we do think about these things. And actually for the IMechE's perspective, just as a side note, people turn to the IMechE for guidance and advice. And I think it's one of the perfect things that we should be advising and not necessarily telling people how to do it, but helping people learn about things like diversity and inclusion. So a question for many employers will be, we can't afford not to get involved in this because it's part of the culture that exists outside of our organization. So it's about forming that understanding, your own understanding and your own strategy, and trying to relate that to your colleagues and employees, and saying, how can we work with this? Keep talking, keep engaging with people and giving people that opportunity to learn. So there's nothing to stop you, if you're early in your career, role modeling for others and trying to emulate what you would like to be occurring around you.
I think as well, we earlier talked about diversity and inclusion and business practices. So actually perhaps thinking of DNI as a business case. So perhaps presenting it to senior management in terms of, if you do have a more diversity, you're going to create more innovation. And there's lots of data to show that more diverse teams essentially increase the profitability of your business. With those kinds of arguments and be presenting that to the senior leaders within your organisation, that could potentially be a way to create some traction as well. So we have another question come in. So our next question is from Nathan. Nathan says that it's great that we're becoming more and more DNI aware. Things have really progressed. And how do we make DNI more proactive rather than reactive? For example, training specifically set up due to a complaint raised. So just coming to the panel now in terms of how do we make DNI more proactive rather than reactive? Anna, could I come to you?
That is a good question. It's not an easy one to answer either, really, because a lot of it is very reactive, what we're doing. We're trying to sort of catch up with where we should be at. But I like the suggestion in the question about training specifically set up due to sort of deal with that. I know it says specifically set up due to complaints raised, and that is being reactive, but being proactive, it's a bit like what we've just been discussing about being a trailblazer and getting in there first and saying what we need to do before complaints are actually raised. I think it links very, very strongly to the question that we've just spoken about, really. Being proactive, getting in there, putting ideas forward and not being deterred or put off when people get in your way and try and block you from pushing those ideas. I think that's probably all I can offer on that question, really. It's quite a difficult one to answer for me.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've seen done quite successfully is creating employee resource groups. So these are groups where like-minded individuals and their allies can network and have a community of like-minded individuals, which is a safe space where they can share their ideas and thoughts, but also having a mechanism for those employee resource groups to feed into the overarching strategy as well. So they feel that their voices are heard and they have a direct impact on the company going forward and the company strategy. So Heather, do you have any thoughts on this topic?
What you've both said already was, yeah, their main points, but also, yeah, looking at resources and using some other people's previous experiences. So like having that thinking around like what could like the potential barriers be, because that's what I do every time I leave the house. It's the what hazards could I see, what could I like go into, what mess could happen today. And like understanding what the potential barriers could be, and then try and think of ways around them, like before it happens. It is very difficult way of thinking, but like having like different resources from like other places like the IMechE and other places around DNI, and like talking to the right people. So talking to the people that could have had previous experience with those barriers in particular and things like that. Yeah, I think those 3 points, yeah, were the main answers that I was going to put. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Heather. And Roy, coming to you.
I think the answers so far have been useful and practical. There might not be too much I can add, but if you want to think about it from an individual perspective and how can you be proactive yourself that has an impact on your immediate community, and it could be something just as simple as actually fact-finding and trying to just understand the immediate challenges that you have at hand. And people may not want to voice those or talk about them, but maybe it's a case of some one-to-ones, that's where you can be proactive, and just listening to someone can actually maybe proactively prevent some difficulties further down the line, because you can then take action on certain things. And the very act of helping someone feel listened to and held can actually add a lot of proactive value, if you want to call it that. And you're not doing it just because it's got some value at the end. You want to help people. I'm sure that's the key thing about a lot of what we're talking about here. But I think the examples already given are excellent.
In the ally community as well, I think, Roy. So we are coming towards the end of the session now. So I would like to thank you all for attending, and a special thanks to the panel for sharing their thoughts and being so open and honest about their experiences. If you would like to know more about diversity and inclusion at the IMechE in particular, then please do visit our web pages. There's more information on our website regarding our DNI strategy, and also more information regarding our DNI committee. And there are details on there regarding how you can reach out to us as well. So if you would like to get involved, please do visit the website for more details and get in contact with us. Apart from that, I would just say thank you for attending today. Hopefully, some practical examples. I see you at a webinar in the future. I hope you all have a good afternoon, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.